Paycheck protection forgiveness is a huge mess right now. The SBA recently came out with their very own direct forgiveness portal in order to simplify the forgiveness process, but it's actually made things much more difficult. This portal right here, if you're not familiar with it. So I decided to make this video to stop the confusion about what is going on with this new portal, what it does, what the portal actually does, why this portal is even here, the issues with this new process, and the steps that you should take. There's a lot of people who are asking questions and are just confused about what's going on, very rightfully so, so I wanted to kind of quell all the confusion, and I absolutely recommend watching this entire video if you have a PPP loan. That way you know exactly what to expect for your individual situation. So let's start off with what this new portal does. It's actually much smaller than it seems. So first off, it allows lenders to use the SBA's forgiveness portal instead of building their own. They use this portal. This isn't what the portal looks like on the lender's end, but it's very similar. And I'll explain why they did this in a minute. But it also limits the paperwork necessary for forgiveness to some degree. So if a lender opts in to use the SBA's direct forgiveness portal, they'll be able to use what's called the COVID score. This is an algorithm made by Dun & Bradstreet that uses things like employment data, foot traffic, traffic data, market data, and other proprietary data to determine if industries and areas were dramatically impacted or not by the pandemic. Thus, the business doesn't need to certify because in an aggregate, that industry was already impacted or that area was already impacted. Basically, you're able to punch in some information about your business and they'll determine if your industry saw a significant economic loss or not without you needing to submit your tax returns, things like that. That only applies to second draw loans. So only for second draw loans do you need to certify the reduction in gross receipts or revenue, whatever you want to call it. You need to show a 25% reduction on a quarter-to-quarter comparison, comparing any quarter 2019 to any quarter 2020 to show that reduction due to the pandemic. Also, a side note here, if for whatever reason the system denies you, the COVID score says that you didn't have the correct loss, you still can prove the reduction of revenue with things like a tax return, bank statements, or a quarterly P&L. If you have that information, you can still prove it if the system for whatever reason denies you. Overall, these changes are great for PPP loan holders. It is a step in the right direction, but the marketing and the implementation of this entire thing is very confusing, and I'm getting blown up with comments, so I want to help here. So why did they make these changes, especially so late in the game, months and months after the program is already closed? First off, the biggest reason is small lenders. Tiny lenders like CDFIs have been a very important piece of the Paycheck Protection Program, especially at the end when there was only funding left for CDFIs. They were pumping out loans like crazy. But these lenders are not used to anything remotely like this. They had to pump up like $8 to $10 billion in loans. They're not used to that at all. They don't have the infrastructure to process all this forgiveness, to process the documentation that's needed. They were just pumping out these loans. They don't have the infrastructure. So the SBA built the infrastructure for them to allow lenders to either use this or to use their own. The move over time has been to make the Paycheck Protection Program easier to be forgiven. More and more over time. If we look at the very first PPP forgiveness application, I actually did a video on it. It was 13 pages long. You had to do all kinds of calculations and go back and forth from like page 2 to page 14. It was horrendous. They did away with that and they made it slightly easier. Then they made it to where it is right now with the Form 3508S. That's one page. Most people don't even need to submit any documentation besides that revenue reduction if it is your second draw, and now that's not even needed in many cases now. Now, here are the issues with this portal. First off is the marketing of the program. They made it seem like this is a solution for all PPP loans. They made it seem like if your lender doesn't reach out to you in a timely manner, it doesn't matter. You can just go to the SBA, fill this thing out, and do it yourself. That's not exactly how it works. Your lender is still involved regardless whether you use this portal or your lender's dedicated portal. They're still involved, and you only can do one or the other. We'll explain that in a minute, though. So they made it seem like your lender has no part in the forgiveness process. And I'm here to tell you they do. I read more than 200 pages of instructions on how this portal works, both on the borrower's end and the lender's end, like how they actually receive the paperwork, how the process works. I did another video on this if you want an even more in-depth breakdown. I'll pin that above if you really want to understand the nitty-gritty. I suppose it's helpful. So how it works is if your lender is using this direct forgiveness portal, you will submit your documentation there, but then your lender still verifies all that documentation and sends it to the SBA after they give it the A-OK. As opposed to the process before this where you would just go to your lender's portal, they would verify it and then send it off to the SBA. It's literally just a different portal. So the marketing was confusing there. And then also we have the issue that there's no clear direction of who will use the portal and who won't. The SBA didn't say everyone is going to use this. Lenders have to opt into this. Now, at least 800 lenders have already signed up. I actually found a document that I'll link down in the description. I'll show you in a minute that shows all the lenders that are using it so far. I'll have a little spot in there where you can type in your email and I'll just send you the spreadsheet. But there's about 800 lenders that have already signed up, but that's not all the lenders. And we don't know who is going to sign up in the near future or not. So there's no clear direction here. The SBA didn't say like everyone has to make this an option. And also solutions were already being built without the SBA. Now lenders need to decide what to do. Because the SBA didn't have this out until months after PPP already ended. So there was already solutions. There was people who contracted with various sites and services that would do the forgiveness for them. And now they're like, well, do we use the SBA's portal? Do we back out of that? And there's a whole lot of just question marks floating around for lenders right now who haven't yet signed up with the direct forgiveness portal. So it's very confusing. But now let's talk about which lenders are actually using the direct forgiveness portal. So like I said, I have this spreadsheet here. Let me pull it up real quick. This has all of the lenders who are a part of it so far. Obviously, I'm not going to read off all 800 of these, so I'll have this in the description if you're curious to see if your lender is on here or not. I'll just send you an email with this document. So what it seems by looking at this list is the largest banks, like a Bank of America, Chase, Wells Fargo, they're unlikely to use this direct forgiveness portal. Now, we don't know for sure, but this is because they would already have infrastructure in place. Now, where it gets a little bit fuzzy, a little bit gray area are the small to mid-sized lenders. That's where we don't know exactly what's going to go on with direct forgiveness, and there's no rush. There's no deadline for lenders to sign up for this. So it's not like, well, if my lender doesn't sign up by whatever, September 1st, then I know what's going on. You don't know. There's no deadline. They've made this incredibly confusing. Now, a lot of people I know are going to be asking, what if I used a fintech like Womply or Blue Acorn? Where do I go for forgiveness? This is where things get even more confusing because both Womply and Blue Acorn have more than a dozen individual lenders. So when you use one of those services, they're actually doing the processing for you, sending it to a different lender, which would be on your actual loan documents. The lender's name would be on the loan documents. But the person who facilitates forgiveness is actually your lender. So the lender, the bank, decides whether they want to use the direct forgiveness portal or not. So with Womply, some of them are using it, some of them are not. I suspect the same is probably for Blue Acorn as well because they have, a dozen plus lenders and they're all completely different entities who make their own decisions. So we don't know exactly if you're using Womply, Blue Acorn, unless you can find on that list what's going to happen. Some are still debating on what they should do. So let's talk about what you should do next. First step is just wait for instructions from your lender. If, let's say, you check this list and your lender is on it, you still want to wait. And that's because, I read through all the documentation for this portal. The SBA gives out the portal's API, which means that lenders can alter the process of the portal, including filling in your data, so they could have you fill in your data on their own site still and just send it over to this portal. So even if they're on that list, the process might be slightly different. So you'll want to wait for instructions from your lender. They'll send you an email and say, hey, time is now to apply for forgiveness. Click here. Make sure it's actually from your lender, from the at whatever your lender's domain is. So I'm sure there's going to be scammers here. So be careful with that. But they will send you instructions. Your lender will contact you and tell you the next steps. Now, there's something you need to remember. You need to remember that you still have 10 months after your covered period to apply for forgiveness. So even at the shortest, let's say your covered period is 8 weeks and you got your loan in, let's say January, just to really bump forward the timeline. Let's say in January. So you have your covered period 8 weeks. Now you have till the beginning. The beginning of March would be when that 10 months starts. So then you would still have an additional 10 months, which brings you basically until 2022 to apply for forgiveness if you had received that in January. So there's time here. I have PPP loans. I have not applied for forgiveness. I will let you know once I do apply. That way, if you just subscribe, you will know exactly where I'm at with the process. And I can say, hey, this is exactly what I did. You'll know what I did because I'm, as you can see, deep in this process. Another thing I would recommend is to have the documentation just in case. So for most loans, you won't need documentation, but some will. Some lenders just want to do a little bit more due diligence, and they'll require more documents. Other lenders will pick random people, and you'll have to submit some more documents. So I think it's good just to have on hand basic information like a PDF of your tax returns, your bank statements, things like basic information that they may require to verify things about your business. Now there is something that's exciting, a possibility for the future. There have been mumblings of automatic forgiveness for all loans under $150,000. Now that would solve all of this. That would be absolutely amazing. I'm not sure how they would facilitate that with how bad the fraud was with the Paycheck Protection Program, but that would make things so much easier for so many people. The average loan size, I think, was $42,000, so that would be just about everyone would get that automatic forgiveness for under 150K. So that's another thing to keep an eye open for, because there's been mumblings. Congress might make that happen. Like I mentioned earlier, they've made this process easier and easier over time. So time will only tell as to what happens. But as of now, be patient, wait for communication from your lender, make sure it's actually from your lender, and you will know what to do with this process. So I hope this helped clear the air. If you appreciate this video, just give it a like, give me a subscribe. That way you can stay up to date. If you want to help me out even more, check out my various offers linked down in the description for affiliate links, things like that. You can grab some free stocks, free crypto, other cool stuff down in the description. And I would just like to thank you for watching, and I hope you have a profitable day.